Hey everybody, Brendan here. Welcome back to the final game of the Ontario Open. I'm playing against Eddie L in this one, not Eddie X, like the first game. And I am playing with the black pieces here. So this was a funny one because it's kind of like a similar story to the game with the other Eddie. And let's get into why that's the case by just covering the game. So we see d4, knight f6, just going for like a potential King's Indian against Eddie, knight f3, and now d5. I just transpose into playing my regular potential semi-Slav. So we see e3, and I play c6, bishop d3, bishop g4, just developing my pieces naturally. c4, knight b d7, queen b3 and queen b6. I'm happy to go for a queen trade here. There's not really another move. I kind of have to go for this, I think. I think that's the best course of action that I was comfortable with. Knight b d2, e6, castles, and I finally decide to take and then play a5. Trying to gain a little bit of space on the queen side here. Now we see knight b to d2, bishop to e7, and rook to e1. E4 was also playable. D takes e4, knight takes e4, and I would just take on e4, or I would take on f3 even maybe. And I think black is quite happy in that variation though, because the structure is not so great for white here. So rook e1 was played instead. Now we see castles. h3, bishop to h5, g4, bishop g6, trade, e4, d takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, rook takes e4, and rook f to d8. So this is very comfortable for black. Very standard opening. Feels like pretty equal. But, you know, there's still imbalances, which is nice, especially since I'm playing someone a lot lower rated. I would like to kind of keep the potential open for something in this position. And that's why I ended up going for the move rook f d8. For example, like a d5 might be very tempting, but this is just a bad move because I can take it and play knight f6 at the very least, which causes problems because now they just lose a pawn. So that's one example here of just, you know, why I'm trying to be a little bit more cagey. Rook e1 was played, knight to b6 to target the c4 pawn, and then also after b3 go for a4. They played bishop to f4 here. So unfortunately I'm not really in time to take on b3 because they have bishop c7 as a threat right now. I play rook d to c8. I could also play rook a6, but I was happy with rook d c8 because it's just a temporary threat. If I ever move my knight, I can always go back to d8. Plus, I'm not really doing anything on the d file because the knight is defending their weakness on d4. Bishop to e3 was played. Now I take on b3 because they don't really have time to play d5 because at the very least I have knight takes c4. So a takes b3 back. And I just trade off all the rooks, which I was pretty happy about. And my idea here was that my opponent, again, was just lower rated, so it's going into a position that was like slightly worse, and I really wasn't concerned here. And I think that's pretty accurate evaluation of the position, that it's just like, it's fine. And I was just hoping that maybe they'd overpush, because they might have a slight edge here because of the space, but realistically it's nothing. Bishop d6, f4, and bishop takes e5. And I think this is interesting. It might be unnecessary, but I actually think it's totally fine. Bishop takes e5. And after f takes e5, king f8 is fine as well. I should play b5 at some point. I end up not doing that in time, though, unfortunately. King f2, king e7, king e3, f3, and I played knight c7 here, but b5 is like my last chance to play it. B5 is very, very strong, just because they don't really want to take on b5, and they don't really want to like ignore it, because now if they ignore it, I can get onto a route with my knight that's actually very effective by playing knight c7, a6, b8 to d7. It's a bit of a long maneuver, but when the knight gets to d7, it just kind of covers all weaknesses. Then my king's like free to move. So knight c7 was played instead. King e4 and b5. So this is just a mistake now. This is kind of like, oh, okay, it's not a mistake actually. But it's just like, it's not as well timed, unfortunately. Because, you know, there's moves like bishop d2. And yeah, I should play knight a6 again with the idea of getting to this diagonal. The second I can, I'll be a lot safer. But it's under worse terms at this point by now. But instead, I take on c4, which now that's a mistake. That's just a clear mistake. If my knight was like shuffled over one square, then I think this is actually fine. But it's not. And it actually cannot get to d7 in a good way at all this game. Bishop b4 check, king d7, b takes c4. And I'd love to play knight a6, but bishop f8 just wins a pawn. And I can't allow that. So I play g5 here with the idea that now I can play knight a6 to b8. But of course g5 is weak. So they play bishop f8. I play knight e8. And of course that is pretty far away from the d7 square. Because even though it takes two moves, the only move I can make to get there is f6, and that's guarded by their pawn, so that's not possible. Bishop c5, king d8, bishop to b4, king d7, bishop to d2, and now I have to play f6, which is kind of like just another weakness. So yeah, I'm just like, unfortunately, just because I was a bit too lax in this game, I just get much worse at this point. Knight c7, bishop d6, and here, yeah, I think a good chance to play for something was g6. I wasn't really looking for these types of moves, unfortunately. But now maybe there's f5 check, going for more. And the whole point is they can't really go into the endgame because f5 check actually wins for black. So that would be good for us. And of course, it's important to mention that after f6 takes, we can take the bishop, and this pawn will easily be picked up. King d7, e8. They're not in time. And yeah, black would be winning here as well. So yeah, bishop d6. I played king d8 though. Bishop f8, knight e8, bishop to b4. And now we see king d7, bishop back to f8, king d8. So I'm just like shuffling. And now they play d5, which is also not correct. Because now I can actually hold the game. But again, I was just being too fancy, and it was a long and not so great tournament. So I kind of understand why things didn't go so well here for me. C takes d5, c takes d5, e takes, king takes d5. And I played king d7, which I thought was interesting. And at first I thought it was holding, but I missed kind of like a nuance here. I thought that after e6 check, I can move my knight, get my king to e8, and then put my knight on e5. But unfortunately, that doesn't actually happen, because after e6 check, king c7, like I would like to play a move like king d8, but I can't really afford to do that, because I think there's just king c6 here, and there's problems with e7 now, and I'm actually kind of just like practically in a zugzwang. There might even be stronger if I put on the engine. Let me see. After king d8, and yeah, king c6 is correct. We're after g6, which is the only move that doesn't lose something on the spot. E7 check just wins as expected here. King c8, and now actually the cold, calm, collected bishop h6. With the idea that like if I move my knight, then they finally get access to d6 and e6, which is a very important thing to note here. Just to mention that. But yeah, king c7 was played instead. But yeah, going back before we go on to see the loss, I could have just played knight c7 check here, which actually just holds. King d6, now I take on e5. And yeah, they can take on g7 or on g5 or anything, but the goal for us is just to go back. So taking on g7 actually is fine for us. We just knight e8 check and we pick up the bishop, so we're happy there. So bishop e7 check is interesting. We go king e8. Again, if they take the knight, then we take the bishop. We're actually winning here. So this would be very nice change of pace. But after it takes on g5, we give a check on b5. Our goal is to reroute somehow to get to the king side, but it's not super important that we get our knight back immediately because we always have chances to shuffle it and force them to either restrict it or allow it back into the game. And the second it gets back in for the defense, then we're totally fine. So king takes e5, king f7, bishop d8. And yeah, knight a7, and yeah, either we can shuffle back in with some sort of like knight e7 or like knight c8, or if we don't get to shuffle like that, then we just get to shuffle, or if we don't get to move back in, then we just have to shuffle, which isn't really the worst thing in the world here. But this is totally drawn, not the craziest draw ever. But I was being too fancy with king d7. Absolutely no reason to play it. And after e6 check, king c7, bishop b4, g6 to prevent any like king e4 to f5s. Bishop a5 check, king c8, king c6. I'm just kind of in a zugzwang here. If I move my knight, then they get king d6 and king e7 in. So I can't do that. So I just play f5. But of course this is losing. e7, f4. Bishop c3, f3, bishop d4, knight c7, bishop f2, knight e8, bishop g3, knight f6, and king d6. And I ended up resigning here. Very bad game by me. Absolutely, completely unnecessary to lose this one. There was many times where I had a easy draw in my pocket, and I just kind of let it go. A few rash decisions. Bishop takes e5 is a little rash, but objectively it is okay. But yeah, not going for b5 in these types of positions, because the second I get b5 and can maneuver my knight back to d7, everything's defended perfectly. But in my mind, with the trade on e5, I was actually just hoping for more, which was very unfortunate, because you know, even in slightly worse positions, I like to push. But there was a bit of a lesson learned there, where it's just like sometimes I have to remember not every position's a position to push, and this was one of those cases. But I still feel like it was, yeah, just unnecessary, and a lesson that I begrudgingly had to learn. But yeah, that actually covers it for game number 6 here, and that is it for the tournament. So I ended up with -2 for this one, which is not great. Overall, the level of my play was somewhat okay here and there. There were some moments where it was reasonable, but there's a lot of times where I was just playing super risky for absolutely no reason. And yeah, that's about it. I was playing completely out of style, honestly. So I went back to my style and kind of refined, and I think I made improvements over the year. So we still have like 30 or 40 games for me to cover, for me to get up to date. As I'm recording this, it's almost the end of the year, so I still have like 30 or 40 classical games to go over at this point. So there's still a lot of these videos to come. So hopefully you're excited for that, and I will see you in the next one. All right, thanks guys for watching, and see ya. Bye bye.